Good evening. This is Crash Talk. I'm Mike Harber, your host. And tonight, I kind of connected with an old friend of mine that I haven't talked to in a long, long time. And we go back 25 years or better, met at a seminar on collision repair and diminished value, an attorney out of Arizona. And I have a lot of respect for this guy. He has done some things and really made a lot of major changes. So let's, I'm not an attorney. I think that I already say that. I sometimes I get mixed up. I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you any legal advice. If you need an attorney in your area, seek one. And this attorney, David Wattel, has offices in several states, including the state of Washington, in, I believe it's in Fircrest or University Place. And you can talk to them, have them review your case. What is it worth? Anyway, let's get to hear what David has to say.
It's got to be 20 years ago, Mike, at least.
No, it's more than that.
Yeah, maybe 25 years ago.
Yeah. And as I remember, you were the attorney that really took on this whole property damage issue that no other law firms would do. With your firm and the way that you've done things in the past, you're one of the attorneys that don't tell people, well, we don't do property damage. You'll have to do that on your own.
No, and in fact, for the total losses and cost of repair, we guide, we help negotiate. Don't take any percentage of that on loss of use. We look to make the client whole. If we've advantaged them and it's reasonable to take a fee on that, so be it. And on the diminished value, again, that's something that we pursue, not only in a pre-lit setting, but we'll litigate the case and we'll litigate a diminished value claim even without personal injury. And we went so far as taking a case through the Court of Appeals and help validating the law in the state of Arizona at the very least. And then I took to task, trying to show the industry how to remain independent from insurance companies and to show the evils of a direct repair program facility by opening independent body shops.
I don't know what to do. I'm technically
it's not a bad problem.
And this is another phone system that I can't shut off because if I shut this one off, I shut you off.
I get it.
It'll stop in a second. Maybe.
Yeah, the Oliver case is.
I was going to ask you about the Oliver case.
That's our case.
Hang on a minute. Explain the Oliver case in simple layman's terms.
Sure. So State Farm, the carrier on the case, that seems to go after these issues when it's going to cost them a lot of money because they're so sizable, felt it was inappropriate to pay on diminished value when a vehicle hadn't been sold. And, we made it very clear that the law, jury instructions and so forth show otherwise. And we got a lower court decision. I don't remember if it was a jury trial or a bench trial, but got a verdict. And they appealed it and took it through the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals said, State Farm, you're wrong. And guarantee you that case is cited every single day of the week by attorneys here in Arizona and probably utilized in other jurisdictions as well, because the premise is the most important behind diminished value. Why should somebody be forced to sell a vehicle to appreciate the loss when they've already actually experienced the loss?
Well, and what I get from that, and again, as a lay person, when I read that case, what's significant to me is it and Michael York, your partner, he was the one that tried it, right? Or did you?
I did not try the case, and I don't know if Mike tried it either. Maybe one of my partner lawyers tried it.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure. I don't recall, but one of the lawyers in the firm tried the case, got a decision. Mike's probably the best legal writer in the firm, and as a result, he took that one through the Court of Appeals. We've taken some other cases through the Court of Appeals in Arizona as well that are also very important pieces of law. One dealing with exhaustion of underinsured motorist coverage, where you don't have to exhaust.
But that's interesting. I want to hear that. But okay, wait, you're getting me excited because in the Oliver case, where it said that a consumer doesn't have to sell their vehicle to prove their loss, what they came out and said is that it's actually better to use an expert to make that determination.
Well, what they came back to say is, all right, if you don't have to sell it, then how do you determine the loss? And, we use the term expert these days fairly loosely, specifically with COVID and all, because who's an expert? Well, an expert is deemed somebody that has more knowledge than the average person on a particular subject. So an expert is somebody in the automotive industry that has an understanding of market value of vehicles. So it could be a certified appraiser. It could actually be a salesperson with significant experience at a car dealership. It could be a wholesaler. But the key is somebody who has more knowledge than the average person. And the equation is really simple. The equation is, what was the vehicle worth before the loss, and what's it worth now? And it's a simple math equation. And we've really advanced in terms of our economic understanding of appraising a loss. So historically, there were a number of different ways or avenues that people went about it, and they said, well, let's use this magic formula, and it was potentially garbage in and garbage out, and then you couldn't substantiate it, and the courts found it foundationally deficient. So, we've come up with the approach, all right, can you get a retail value on the vehicle? Well, odds are you cannot, all right, because once you disclose that it's been involved in a loss, whether you put it up in for sale on Auto Trader or some other publication, they're going to say, well, why should I buy your vehicle that's priced similar to one that's not been involved in a loss and give a retail price? So it's typically eliminated from that. And there are lots of sources available, as you know, to be able to look up the retail value of the vehicle. Auto Trader, Data Guides, Kelley Black Book, et cetera, et cetera. Usually there's not a big argument over a pre-loss value. So if you can't get a retail value, can you get a clean trade-in value? Well, there's a big to-do by the auto industry and certainly the retail auto industry to be able to advertise a vehicle as a certified pre-owned. And if there's been a significant enough loss or damage to the vehicle such that the dealership's not going to be able to say this is a certified pre-owned vehicle, they don't want to give a clean trade-in value. And again, clean trade-in values are well publicized, so those numbers are usually not argued either. So what's the last alternative? The last alternative is a wholesale value. So wholesale values, you reach out to several wholesale dealers and get several bids, and you do an average, and that number from the retail value, which is well publicized, is your diminished value. And it's a true economic evaluation. And what you do is you have your appraiser or your expert on this evaluation walking whoever through the process. It was retail value before. It's not retail value now. Can't get a clean trade-in because of X, Y, and Z, because the dealership's not going to give a clean trade-in. So we got a wholesale. I got 3 wholesale bids. And now it's a simple math equation, and everybody can understand it.
Yeah. Well, explain to me, that was Court of Appeals, Arizona. How does that provide any weight in a state like ours? Does it?
Well, I'm licensed in Arizona, Washington, Oregon, and there are nuances and caveats in every state. The theory on diminished value is the same regardless, because it's an asset. Mm-hmm. And the asset had a value before and now has a different value after. Whether it be a car, whether it be a painting, whether it be an heirloom, we can determine through an expert, somebody again who has knowledge of appraising that particular object and what it was before and what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And though a car is not a unique asset, there's a finite number of a specific vehicle, and you can fairly accurately determine the values of those vehicles, again, based upon published data.
So the farm really seems to be taking a position that we've paid for the repair. There is no diminished value. So how does your firm deal with those types of responses from one of the big playground bullies?
Well, so years ago, carriers dealt with us by saying, well, there's no such thing as diminished value.
Right.
We had to help them understand how wrong they were. And, by championing the rights over and over again of the little guy, or some clients have financial wherewithal, high-end vehicles, they can wait it out. It's good. But by championing those rights, the carriers finally realized, well, geez, this guy Wattel and people he's training and educating, his colleagues aren't going away. So they then, begrudgingly started paying. Then, the law gets validated. State Farm in the Oliver case chose, a case that had really, really good facts for the plaintiff and establishing the diminished value. So it was probably a bad choice anyway, but it wasn't going to change the ultimate decision. So now they're stuck with the law, and then they come about trying to argue, well, yeah, you really can get a clean trade-in value in this vehicle, or we don't believe that the consumer demand is all that different between this vehicle and one that has had this damage and, properly repaired. That's one that's unblemished and the one that's actually the subject of the accident. So they come up with, arguments that, are usually weak at best. And, the law is either pretty consistent across the board out there nowadays, and the diminished value can still be pursued, or should be pursued, and is pursued.
You have offices in several states.
I do. I'm licensed to practice in 3, and then we have other lawyers that are in the firm or are licensed in other states, and then we have a long reach of various co-counsels in other jurisdictions. Now, we don't go looking for, diminished value claims to pursue in the state of Rhode Island. And I'm not picking on Rhode Island, it's just far from where I live. But if we're, sought after, to help out with somebody in that regard, that's fine. Invariably, somebody's got a diminished value claim. Usually there's probably a decent sized wreck, and there's probably an injury claim to pursue as well. And, we're litigation injury lawyers. So we end up, getting not only the diminished value claim to handle, but also the personal injury claim as well.
Sure. Up here in our state of Washington, who tell us about your firm up here?
Yeah, so we've been around, you and I were talking about that before we came online. It's been at least 20 plus years that we've practiced in the state of Washington. And we have a full staff, have managing lawyer partner who's up there. Zach Hansen does an outstanding job. And then you have my involvement and any others on the team that may be located in Arizona or elsewhere, assisting as needed.
So will the firm take a claim for diminished value even if there isn't injuries? Or is it?
Sure.
Oh,
yeah, of course. I mean, and in fact, we're probably one of the few that will. We look at it from an economic standpoint. I had a discussion earlier today with a client about a medical malpractice claim. I said, listen, I can't take on your claim because it's going to cost $100,000 in cost, and maybe your case is worth $200,000, and I'm going to take 50% of the fee, and you're going to be left with not a whole lot at the end, and you're going to say, well, this really wasn't worth it. So from an economic standpoint, I'm not going to take on that case because I don't want to disappoint the client. There are some diminished value claims that aren't worth pursuing with counsel involved because you're going to have to pay for the expert, the appraiser. You're going to have to pay attorney fees, potentially costs, though they may be reimbursed if you're the prevailing party in the action, and it's not worth it. So there are some that we won't help simply because we don't think we can benefit the client. And that's being honest. That's having integrity when it comes time to deal with the client. Others, where we think, all right, $5,000 diminished value claim, listen, who else is going to help those people?
Right.
A lot of attorneys look for the brass ring. They want the DUI defendant, though you can't get punitive damages in the state of Washington, but you want the DUI defendant and aggravated liability, deep pocket, big injuries. And, you submit a demand letter and collect a lot of money. Those are the brass ring. It's unfortunate that they happen. But, rather than spend, time hiring an expert or an appraiser on a diminished value claim and then having to write up a demand letter and then having to negotiate it, and then negotiations fail, and then having to file a lawsuit and having to do some discovery, they don't want that. Mm-hmm. I, on the other hand, understand that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. The carriers escape, paying what they should be paying. And most importantly is I'm not serving the community. And guess what? That client that I collect $5,000 for, and they net some money out of that nobody else was going to help them, they're going to know 10 friends who are going to need my help. And those other 10 friends are going to have quality, large claims. And guess who's going to get them?
Yeah.
So it's really not a loss leader per se. It's about what's doing right for the community, and what goes around comes around.
Well, David, that's why I've always had a lot of respect for you, just because of the way that you face this type of a challenge. And I'm sure you're aware, I think 4 years, 5 years, I kept pounding on the legislature to raise the small claims limit, and they've raised it here to $10,000. And so that's an avenue that we're able to kind of help on these smaller claims. And so it doesn't end up, bogging down a firm like yours on these claims that are under $10,000, because in small claims court, attorneys aren't allowed anyhow.
Yeah, and that's nice. Most states, the limits are less than that, mm-hmm. or there's a jurisdictional limit where it's in common between small claims and the next level above. So it can end up with a lawyer in one and not in the other. But that's terrific. Though as vehicles become more and more expensive, even small property damage claims can end up having a significant depreciation value. And as a result, that limit eventually is going to be inadequate in and of itself, again, in resolving these claims.
Sure. All right.
Well, I hope you can see why I have a lot of respect for David. He is genuine. He really cares about his clients and helping people, and he's made some major changes, and they've stuck their neck out to do the right thing, and I respect him for that. So let us know. Thumbs up, thumbs down, the routine. Subscribe, the little button down below. Click on it. You're not on a mailing list or anything like that. You just get a notification when we've got a new show. We're trying to do a new episode every Friday night at 7:15. And if it's something that you want, then we'll continue to do it. If not, maybe it's not important. But if you have an accident, you don't need this information. You don't need to know what's going on until you need it. So anyway, here's the other thing. Wear your mask. Keep your distance. Stay safe. We'll see you same time, same place next week. This has been Crash Talk.